Hello people of the internet. My name is Volodymyr and now I will show you how to install Unreal, create your first project and everything about the program's interface. This video is part of my course on architectural visualization in Unreal Engine 5, so you can see how our training goes. Let's go! And now we are on the Unreal Engine website where we will download our Unreal. I already have the download button at the top right. For those who have never registered on the Unreal Engine website before, you will need to register and create an account first. You will also need it later for purchasing various plugins and models on the marketplace. So, log in, register, and then you will see the download button. You download it, install it, and initially it will not install Unreal Engine, but Epic Games Launcher. It looks like this. We launch it. This kind of launcher appears. I'll tell you a bit about it. We have a store here. This store is, for those who play computer games, they know what Steam is. This is a copy of Steam by Epic Games. That is, games are sold here that you can play. Next, there is the library. These are the games you have purchased and downloaded. And the tab that we need the most is Unreal Engine. We enter, and our launcher appears with everything related to Unreal. Several tabs appear at the top. The first one is News. Everything happening in the world of Unreal appears here. That is, as soon as a new Unreal is released, like 5.5, you can go in, and it will open in the browser. An article about Unreal 5.5 and its new features, and various news that Epic Games have recently released. On the right, there's a sort of gallery of works by people who post on various forums and tag Epic Games or Unreal Engine, and they repost those works. Here, there you go. The second tab is Samples, a very important and interesting tab. Here, you can download ready-made projects created by Epic Games themselves for Unreal. They are free, meaning we can access them, like the city sample. Perhaps you have seen it. For those who haven't, I'll explain briefly. The first demo of Unreal Engine 5 is a complete city created to demonstrate the Matrix movie. That is, it is detailed down to the smallest elements. As you can see, you can download it and fully explore, fly around and use it. It is free, and you can use everything that is available in that city, including people, cars, and traffic lights. That is, everything you find, you can copy into your project and use it. One thing, it weighs 130 gigabytes. Keep that in mind. But it is a must for everyone who starts working in Unreal to download and take a look, because it is very interesting. Lyra Starter Games is, yes, like Unreal Engine. We have it created for games. It is, roughly speaking, an already created multiplayer game. With all the settings, meaning it's like a template that you can modify, it's already a finished game where you can turn it on, play with friends, they can even join, but it is, roughly speaking, made in Unreal, Document Editor. So you can go in and see how it is made, meaning how all the programming is written, and change everything, and also extract everything from there. For those who might want to join game development in the future, it will also be interesting. And below there are also a lot of such demonstration scenes that you can download and view. A new animation in Unreal has been released. Also, Electric Dreams is a kind of a large multi-kilometer forest that was showcased in the Unreal Engine 5.4 demonstration. So you can completely download all of this, copy it into your own projects. A huge area. Everything is detailed, and you can see everywhere how it all works, how it is all programmed, and use all those reports as well. Very convenient, and there are many like these about metahumans, about how here muscle animation is created in Unreal, meaning this is also new. This is a new feature that appeared in Unreal 5.4. Many different things to review, the car configurator. But one of the most interesting is this, content examples. It represents a kind of museum. You could call it that. The image will load now. like this. We approach, and here it is written what is happening. There is usually a button you can press, and an animation occurs. Here is a button. We approach directly in the project, press it, and see how the character moves. And everywhere, it is described how it is programmed, how it works, how it is rendered. In other words, it is, roughly speaking, a collection of all Unreal's capabilities in a museum-like mode. We approach, and there's something about a feature. It's described, shown, you can open it and see how it is programmed. And there are included materials, animation, and movements. That is, it is constantly updated, starting from Unreal Engine 4.0 to 5.5. Now, as soon as new features are released, this content examples is updated. We also download it, go inside, and it's very interesting to see how everything works. This is regarding the sample tab. You need to review it here. Of course, you need at least some knowledge of English to understand what it's about, but it's very interesting, even just to look at visually. The next tab is the Fab tab. Previously, there was a marketplace here. We used to go directly here. There was a store. You could find something, search, that is, buy all the assets. It was the Unreal Engine store, or more precisely, Epic Games. And everything related to Unreal could be purchased. Now, from the new year, before the new year, they launched this Fab. A Fab combined the marketplace that was here, and it also integrated Quixel Bridge. These are such libraries of scanned very, very cool materials and objects. It all merged into this Fab. There was also a site for models, not only for Unreal, but also for 3ds Max and Blender. It was called Sketchfab, so it also joined here. And there is also a site called ArtStation. It works like a gallery, and there's also a store there. It will also soon join here, and much more will join this Fab. So they made such a huge store, and for some reason called it Fab. No one still knows what it stands for. A strange name, if you ask me. And currently, to be honest, they're not doing so well because they, if something works well, there's no need to break it, but they broke it because before you could easily, let me launch this Fab. It looks like this. And here, as you can see, you can use it for Unity, which is another engine. There's one for Unreal. There's Unreal for Fortnite, and Fortnite is such a game. Based on Unreal and for 3D Max, you can also find something here, but all the filtering that used to be in the marketplace is gone. It disappeared. So now there are just a couple of buttons, and that's it. There's nothing in any list that you can compile of what you like. Overall, they made it worse. They will, of course, improve it over time, but for now it works so-so. But we have what we have. We work with what is available. I will be telling you which plugins are worth attention, which are essential. I will even share some because I have permission from the developers. More on that later. And the next main tab, here we have the library, a library like Unreal itself. You can see I currently have 4 versions of Unreal installed. When you first launch your Epic Games launcher, it will be completely empty here. You will only have this plus sign. There will be no My Projects at all because you don't have any projects. And also the Fabi library, it will be empty for you as well. So you will only have this yellow plus sign. And to install Unreal, we click this plus sign. A gray icon appears like this. The Unreal icon is not installed yet. We click, select the version we need. I already have the latest ones installed, so it offers some of the previous versions. And you click install, after which I will show you one moment. Now the following window will appear. Be sure to click options. Here you can choose additional elements that are installed with Unreal. And here, by default, it is set to additional various features needed for game development on Linux, iPhone, Android. We don't need all of this for our work, but as you can see, each of these items takes up 15 gigabytes. Development for Linux, uncheck the box. For iOS Mac, 3 gigabytes, uncheck the box. For Android, almost 4 gigabytes, uncheck the box. And in doing so, we saved ourselves a lot of space. Here, we leave everything that is needed, press apply and press install. I already have the latest version installed. In the course, we go through 5 and 5 with you, install the latest one. And after that, you will have, here is the yellow launch button. You can choose because I have several options, several Unreals. And recently, I've been working more in 5.3, so I chose for myself that this button launches 5.3. But you can choose 5.5 and it will launch 5.5, and you see it immediately gets outlined with a yellow frame. And to launch Unreal itself, we press the button, either here, the yellow launch, not, or over here. But a few more words about the launcher itself. After you have created several projects, they will all appear for you right here, and you can quickly launch them from here. Here are their names, pictures of the projects themselves. And a little below is the library of those plugins you have purchased on, I will refer to it later, Marketplace. Now it's simply called Fabi. Here. And to add any purchased plugin to a project, there is a button, Add to Project. You just click, and a list of your projects will appear. You simply choose one and click Add to Project. This is how you add the plugins or models you have purchased. We will also cover this in a separate section, but just so you understand what it is. Okay, let's move on to launching and creating the first project. Click, Launch. The first launch, don't worry, it can be quite long, meaning it can take up to 5 minutes to load, because yes, since Unreal has never been installed, the compilation of various materials takes a bit longer, but it happens only once per installed version. One installed version of the engine. So we installed 5.5. It will launch faster for me now, but for you it might take a bit longer to start. After launching, we see this window. If you haven't created any projects in Unreal before, then this recent project section will not be there. There will only be tabs for games, films, architecture, automotive, and simulation. What is this? These are templates, presets for further work with the projects you have in mind. They differ from each other only in settings. That is, if you choose, for example, automotive, you can still get everything that is available in games, films, and architecture. It only differs in the specific settings of the project. And also, for example, we have ArchViz for architecture. There is just a scene with some kind of abstract architecture, water, and model like green trees. So if there were no automatic weapons, those trees simply wouldn't be there. But we can download them at any time at our convenience, so therefore it's not a problem. I always recommend everyone to create this blank, the emptiest one, in the games folder. Why? Because it doesn't contain any clutter, meaning it is the smallest in size, the emptiest, with all unnecessary settings turned off. We will enable the necessary settings ourselves and know what we have in the project, because there are so many in different areas. In these, whether in architecture, automotive, or in the software settings themselves, a lot has been changed, and it often hinders us, and we have to search for what they have configured because it conflicts with what we need. And if we choose games, this blank, empty one, then we program it ourselves to suit our needs. Settings. Next, we move on to project location. Here we choose where we save. Click the folder, choose the place where you save your project. And on the right, we have a few more settings. This is the programming option. That is, as I have already told you, and perhaps you know, Unreal has its own programming language. This is Blueprints. It is visual. That is, we will be connecting and linking nodes together. We will not be writing code. Because we are not programmers, we are more artists, so our programming language is visual. But for those who know programming, they can enable C++. Also, target platform. For which platform are we creating the project? Desktop means a computer, because in Unreal you can also create applications for phones, in which case we would choose mobile, but for now we are working on a desktop. And also quality preset. Quality settings. We have it set to maximum because we are on a large, good home computer. And if it's scalable, then it's also for developing for phones, because they are less powerful and therefore have their own settings. We choose maximum. And there's a checkbox for starter content, which we do not select. If we suddenly need something, we can, of course, download them at any time. But these are ready-made Unreals. materials. There is fire. It won't be needed. It will just create unnecessary space, unnecessary folders in our project. So for now, we don't check the box. And we enter the project name. I will name it Lesson on 2. Look, the project name doesn't like spaces. I tried to press the space bar and it shows that project names do not support spaces. So if you want to separate, you use underscores and then you continue writing. I will name it Lesson 2, our second lesson. And I press Create. Our Unreal is loading for the first time. And after the first launch, you will encounter in front of you. This is what Unreal looks like. And I will start explaining each window in turn, and in general, how the management in Unreal works. In the center is the largest window. This is the viewport. Everything we do in Unreal will happen here. Here we will see our both videos and navigate through the project. We will be in this window. So this is our viewport. Viewport navigation is done using the mouse. Hold down the right mouse button and we can look around with the right button held down. To move, since this is a game engine, for game development, the standard gaming layout works here. These are the bouya et SD keys. Just like walking in such games, shooters, these keys. So to move in Unreal, we always hold down the right mouse button. I press W on the keyboard, we move forward. S on the keyboard in English, we move backward. Next, near S is the D key in English. We will move to the right. And to the left of S is A. So our left hand is always on those 4 keys. And I press A, we move to the left. So it turns out W, S, A, D. W, S, A, R, D. To fly up or down, near W, there are Q and E in English. We do everything with the right mouse button held down. Mouse, Q, lowers us down, and English E, that is, it raises us up. So these 6 keys in the corner of the keyboard will be responsible for moving us in our space. In Unreal, up, down, forward, backward, and left, right. And with all that, just by holding down the right mouse button, we can rotate in our space. We select something in our project with the left mouse button, of course, just like in any other program. And to demonstrate other key sets, I will extract them into the project. It will be some object. This will be a cube, for example. And like in every 3D modeling program, this cube has axes along which we can move it. We can move our object along one axis just by dragging with the left mouse button along the other. Along the third, or by choosing between 2, I will zoom in closer to our cube. You see, yes, we select one, then the other, and if between them both are selected, and they will move along those 2 axes, just in that plane. And similarly with others. This is how the movement of our objects in space occurs. Also, we can rotate and scale them just like in any 3D modeling program. That is, here at the top, we have a menu responsible for this. The arrow is for selecting objects. Next, these 4 arrows pointing in different directions. This is for moving. Next is rotation. I enable it and I can rotate our object as well along the axis. And lastly, it's about scaling, meaning to increase or decrease. We can do it along all axes because I chose the center, or along a single axis, stretching, narrowing, or just some along 2 axes, just like moving. Also, if you hover over these icons, you will see the hotkeys. That is, simply by pressing W on the keyboard, we get movement. Pressing E gives rotation, and R is for scaling. These are the hotkeys we will be using. Movement, rotation, and scaling. The next keys are responsible for working with the object in space. And relative to what our axes are positioned, currently they are set in world mode, meaning no matter how we rotate our object, our axes remain the same. However, by pressing this key, we switch to the local version, our coordinates. And As you can see, these coordinates are rotated relative to the object. Now, this means we can move it along its axis in different directions. And if we turn it off, we move this object relative to the entire world. To be honest, not once. In 8 years of working in Unreal have I used this function, but it exists. Tell you about it. So next, we have a few more pieces of information. Buttons that are responsible for, you could say, such movement. As you can see, I am moving the object now and it jumps. And this is where the grid snapping is activated. And this number 10 is tense image. Since we have a large open grid, it seems small, but it is 10 centimeters. So in general, the units of measurement in Unreal are centimeters. And now the snapping is set. Our object will move every 10 centimeters. By pressing, we can choose either every 1 centimeters. A large object, I don't know if right now, it's visible in the video, but it doesn't move smoothly. It still jumps by 1 centimeters. But if we disable this grid, then we can move it freely without any snapping at all. It can be convenient, especially in architectural visualization, to move objects by a certain number of centimeters. Our objects. This also applies to rotation. By default, the rotation is set to every 10 degrees. So we take the object and rotate it. We see 10, 20, 30. Rotations are also done by degrees. And if we disable it, then there is no degree constraint. The same applies to scaling. That is little by little. And if we disable it, our object scales smoothly. Now we will move on to copying and moving. Moving is done simply with the left mouse button. Mouse. To copy an object, we have several options. The first is to press Ctrl and the letter D. In English together, that is to duplicate. I press Ctrl D and it has been duplicated. You see, a second one appeared in the same place. We just move it aside and we have 2. The second method is by holding the Alt key. On the keyboard here, I hold down the Alt key and I just drag and a copy is made. If I release the left mouse button but continue holding Alt and drag again, another copy is made. Holding Shift. We hold Shift and try to drag our object. As you can see, now the camera moves along with our object. Sometimes it can be very convenient. With Shift held down, we fly along with the object like this. If we hold down Shift and Alt together, we will copy and fly with that object. There you go. And depending on what you're working with, but in 3D Max, there's a convenient key. In 3D Max, it's the Z key. If we have flown somewhere, for example, to look at something in the scene, but we need to return to the selected object, we press Z, in 3D Max, and the camera centers on the selected object. In Unreal, the F key on the keyboard is responsible for this, so I press F, and we fly to the selected object. F, and we fly to the selected object. And the standard keys to undo this, Ctrl Z. More of these Ctrl C, Ctrl V, also duplicates. This is such a standard thing that I don't even mention it. So these standard key sets, like copying and pasting, also work. This concerns the movement of objects. Now, on the viewport, we also have certain buttons on the left. Let me tell you about them as well. Here are these 3 stripes on the left. These are the settings of this viewport itself. We click, we see real time. It disables real-time display. That is, for example, right now, by clicking, we won't see anything because there's nothing moving here except for the clouds. If I turn it back on, we can see that the clouds, I don't know if it will be visible in the video, but they are gently, slowly moving, drifting. If we turn off real time, everything freezes and stays in place. The same will happen if we have fire in the scene, for example, or flowing water. If we turn off real time, everything will stop. But by default in Unreal, it is always turned on. Also, show FPS here displays the frames per second. Well, right now we have an empty scene, so it's 120 frames per second. It would be more, but Unreal limits the frames to 120 by default. Next, we have something that we sometimes need, which is Show Toolbar. It removes exactly these keys at the top that we just reviewed with you. What is this for? For example, you want, during work, a client comes to your office and you want to show them directly in the viewport, a part of the project. And so that those buttons don't get in the way, you can remove them. And the next key is F11, this immersive mode. Press F11 on the keyboard and our viewport expands to full screen. And you can now show some part of the project to your client. You demonstrated something. Okay, he left. You pressed F11 and came back here, return the toolbar, meaning all your buttons returned to their place. Another important button we will use is the game view, the G key. What does it do? As you can see now here, the lighting of this scene, it has these icons to make it easier to highlight them in the scene. All these icons are displayed on our screen. If we press the G key, meaning this game view, it removes everything that will not be visible in the final render video or game. So, when will we be walking with you? In the game, I pressed G and everything disappeared, meaning all of that is not visible because these are all auxiliary objects. So, game view hides auxiliary objects. So, you can just view your project there. Those things, for example, I will add any light, for example, a spotlight, and if you have 20 fixtures in the interior, all of that will be hanging there, which will be very distracting to look at, but by pressing game view, it all gets hidden. You can see how your final image looks beautifully, after which you return and continue working. More on this later. In principle, we will also talk about screenshots, and I'll mention bookmarks, a very convenient feature. For example, if you have some architecture, you can set up approximate angles that you like. You start working, doing some greening, and you like this particular angle. But to prevent the camera from getting in your way in the project, you can create bookmarks. So here you have bookmarks, set bookmark, and you select, for example, bookmark number 1. Done. You see here, a message appeared indicating that a bookmark was created. You flew away, worked, and want to take a look, added something to your project, copied. By the way, I forgot to mention, to select multiple objects, hold down Shift, and then click to select several objects. So we added there, I will copy those objects with Alt, and you want to return to that bookmark. Since we made bookmark number 1, it's just a key, 1 on the keyboard. You press it and you return to that bookmark. Great, it looks cool from that side, now I want it from this side too. You go to Bookmarks, Set, Bookmark, and you immediately see the hotkeys. Bookmark number 2 is Ctrl 2. Let me choose. I press Ctrl 2. There's the bookmark. It's saved. We moved aside, worked, just press 2, and we return to this bookmark. It's convenient when working often if you need to return to certain places in the project, especially if the project is very large, so you don't have to constantly move the camera. The bookmarks save you. Also, let's finish here. On the right, we still have, here the camera is sleeping, the camera is drawn. This is exactly about the camera speed. Right now, I'm flying at a certain speed. I hold down the right key and move away from our objects. The speed is quite low, especially when you have a large project. And you need to work on the exterior, arrange the landscaping, the speed is low, you press and choose. Well, the maximum speed there is 32, but that will be a very high speed, so now I press S and I flew, you see, very, very fast. And similarly, to stop flying, I can press F, and the selected objects will be in the middle of the screen. Also, if you are working, for example, you see, now the speed is 32, and I can't even focus on the objects because they are flying by. If you're working on some fine interior decor, for example, reduce the speed to a minimum. And then we will fly to our object for an eternity. As you can see, when I press, we move very, very slowly. This is controlled by the speed here. By default, we have it set to 1, and it changes here. The top button splits our viewports, like in 3D Max, into different ones, and you can choose each one for yourself to suit your needs. Honestly, in 3D Max, I always worked with 4 viewports. In Unreal, I always work with just 1. I don't know why, but here it's very convenient, especially with this quick control. Sometimes when I need to place an object directly on the floor, and I'm not sure if I've positioned it correctly, I can use the perspective button here to choose a view. For example, from the left. I choose it, and here I can place the object on the floor, disable snapping, and so that the cube touches the floor. This way it suits me, and I return to the perspective view. There are also hotkeys here that correspond to each view. The next button, which we will be using, currently says unlit, meaning lit. This is the standard display of our viewport, which includes everything: light, materials, reflections, everything. But if needed, we can enable unlit, for example. What does it do? It completely removes everything except the albedo, leaving only the pure color of your objects. There is no lighting, no reflections, nothing. Next we have the wireframe grid. There is a lit wireframe if desired. There is detail lighting. What is it? It is pure lighting along with reflections. And there is lighting without reflections. Lighting only. These are the main ones we will use. Without materials, without anything. Neutral gray color, and only light. Yes, it's very convenient to adjust the light in your scenes. It's hot. Keys and we go to LED, and the hotkey, ALT4, do not confuse it with ALTF4. If we use any others, I will specifically mention them. For now, at this particular moment in time, these are the main ones we will need. And this tab show, it allows us to disable the display of certain objects. We rarely use it, but sometimes it happens. For example, we can disable the clouds. That is, they are in the project, they are calculated. This is more needed in game development because, for example, we enable the display of frames per second. And we need to hide the clouds because they are in our way. For example, we need to place a planet in the background, but we don't want to turn them off because we want to see how much they load our computer. So we can hide them, but not turn them off. And here we can do a lot. We can turn off the atmosphere. Anti-aliasing. If you know what anti-aliasing is, you can see that our diagonal lines have now become jagged. That is anti-aliasing. We simply turned it off. And there is a lot more. We don't use it, just so you know what it is. And if you suddenly tried and clicked on something, and your image started to look strange, there is a magic button at the top that resets everything to default. Use default. We press it and we have a nice image as default. That's all regarding our viewport. Seems like I haven't forgotten anything. Let's move to the right now. Here we have the outliner. What is the outliner? It is a list. You can drag it, resize all these windows. I will show them later. You can even detach them. But more on that at the end. The outliner stores everything that is in our scene. That is, everything we see here on the screen, everything we've brought into our scene, appears in the outliner. And there is a whole list here. And at the end of our project, when we fill it up, towards the very end, there will be a lot of objects here. But those objects that we don't see, for example, if we've flown somewhere very far, but this cube is not visible now. It's somewhere behind the mountain. We can't select it. We can always find it here, select it, and then fly to it. It's very important to organize everything into folders here. You can create folders here by right-clicking. There are many different options here, and we will talk about them as we work. But here, for example, I have selected a cube now, and it can be immediately moved to create a new folder, and we name it cube, and we select all the cubes with shift and move them into the cube folder. And this way, we will also organize our architecture into folders, so it will be more convenient to work with everything later. Also, all the lighting, as you can see, by default, even in Unreal, is all gathered in the lighting folder. There can be several lighting folders, several scenarios. Lighting setups can exist, so it's important to have all this organized well right here. So here we break everything down into folders. Here we have written how many different objects are currently in our scene. Each light, each cube, even this landscape, it's all divided into these squares. These are all separate pieces, and there are 150 of them in our scene. There are also filters. Here, these three strips, you can add filters. For example, you might have 1,000,000 objects here, and you need to find, for instance, spotlights to do something with them. You can always go to the lighting, and choose a specific filter for. Let it be a spotlight, as I already mentioned. Well, we don't have any in the scene right now, but a filter for spotlights has been created. Let me pull out a spotlight. Here it is, and we could have 1,000 in the scene. And by clicking on this filter, only the spotlight remains in this outline. And filters can be created for anything, such as colors, shapes, sizes, and more. You can even create your own custom filters by clicking here and setting certain specific rules and conditions. Filter by name, for example, if you've named the geometry nicely in 3D Max, and it all came with names, and you need to find it, you can create a custom filter with such a name and easily and efficiently filter your objects. We will be adding here for lighting different filters for post-processes, but that's later. This is the outliner. It is responsible for everything that has already been transferred inside our scene. What does inside our scene mean? I will explain now. A little lower. One of our main tabs is the Details tab. These are the settings of the selected object. What do I mean by selected? Right now we have nothing selected, and as you can see, it is empty. And it says select an object to see details. So I select light spotlight, and its spotlight settings appear. I select cube, and its geometry settings appear. I select landscape, and its landscape settings appear. So the settings of what we have selected will appear here. But they are all united by one thing. That is, no matter what we select, transform is always the first in the list. That is, this is the position to turn of the object we have carefully selected in space. The entire Unreal works precisely with coordinates. That is, it prefers all objects to be exactly close to the center of coordinates. So try, for example, if you modeled in 3D Max your architecture, and it's somewhere a kilometer away from the center of coordinates in 3D Max, if you transfer it to Unreal, it will say upon import that your geometry is quite far away. Certain nuances are possible. Because lighting in Unreal is also calculated better, closer to the center of coordinates. That is, this distance is very large, but very far. Don't stray from the coordinates. So 4 is 4 kilometers. That's normal. That's a sufficient distance. You can work within these limits. If you have a larger project, then you need a special type of map to be enabled. Well, more on that later. So this is with us. Here is the location where our object is positioned along 3 axes. And we can also move it here as well. For example, we have a selected light, hover the mouse, click the left button, and move our object along the X. The ends up, down. This arrow on the right will reset all values to default. Default, for us, it is considered 0. So if I click this arrow, our light moves to the 0 coordinates. Our 0 coordinates are right here. But since the light is shining downwards, it ends up shining underground. We won't delve into those settings in detail now. We will analyze the lighting separately and the geometry separately. But for convenience, I'll share a few details. If we have certain settings that we use most often, for example, in our lights, it's the intensity, temperature. We can add them for quick access. For example, intensity. Right-click, and here's Add to Favorites. Add it. And here you can enable our favorite settings, so you don't have to search, because there are quite a lot of them here, and you might often scroll all the way down to find a setting. And there are also many hidden various settings. And the most needed ones we can add to favorites. So, for example, we also add temperature to favorites, and they all now appear at the very top, even above transform. But for each object, they will be different. So for the light, for the spotlight, we added, if we even select the sun, it will have its own. So just so you know, and another very cool and important thing. For example, let me change a few settings. I'll set the intensity to 20. I'll set the color to red. And I'll remove cast shadows. So this light will not cast any shadows. As you can see, these little right arrows appeared. They indicate that these specific values, we change them, meaning they differ from the default values. And by clicking on that arrow, we return this value to the default. And sometimes there are a lot of them changed. For example, a colleague handed you a project that you need to finish after them. Very easy. Here, when we click on this button, there is Show Only Modified Properties, meaning to show only the modified parameters. By clicking it, everything disappears, leaving only those parameters that someone before you adjusted, or you adjusted and forgot, for example. And you can see what exactly in this object, in this light, in this case, which parameters you are changing. We will be using this. This is regarding the menu. Details. It will change for us from object to object. And another main one we will be working with is the content drawer. But by default in Unreal 5, starting from 5, 5.1, 5.2, and up to 5.5, it is hidden down here. You need to press this button, and a content drawer slides out. It is called a content drawer when it is a sliding drawer, and a content browser when we attach it. We can press the button here, and it will attach. I press it, and it will not go anywhere, you see. The content browser has appeared. The content drawer is also there, but it is already as an attachment. The menu has appeared. This is also a very large and essential part of Unreal. The content browser stores everything you have added to the project. What I told you, what is in our scene and what is in our project, these are two different things. I refer to the scene as what we see in the viewport. So right now we have added these cubes and certain lights to the scene. But in the content browser, there can be trees downloaded from the marketplace, some models. You added from 3D Max all the geometry you imported. But until you drag them into the viewport, they are not considered part of your scene. They are simply in your project, but you are not using them. And Unreal is a bit different from 3D Max, for example. It is more similar to ArchiCAD's archive files. That is, if you have a folder with textures in the project, you put those textures here in the content browser. I'll show you how it's done. And then delete the folder with textures on your computer. It remains here. That is, it will be in this project, and it will not disappear. That is, they are not linked to the files you have on your computer. So, if you've already uploaded them here, they make a copy for themselves. This is both a plus and a minus, because if you work in 3D Max, the same textures can be used for different projects. In Unreal, it won't work that way because we have to migrate those textures between projects, and they are copied each time. So you can delete a project, but they will remain in another. So all of this is gathered here, right here. And on the left, we see a window where the hierarchy of all folders, files, everything we have in the project. Right now it's empty because we've only pulled standard Unreal objects into our scene here. They are not gathered here because they are embedded somewhere inside Unreal. Currently we have an empty content folder. To add some new folders, we simply right-click either here on the left or in this window, and we have new folders here. Let's create a geometry folder. Now, we have it in the content folder. The content folder is the main folder. We cannot create anything outside of it. We can only create inside and deeper within each of the folders as well. Also in our content folder, we will have a textures folder. We will also have a folder for materials. This is how we create folders. Later, we will transfer our files, our geometry, between them. In the geometry folder, we will create additional folders. For example, architecture will be separate and furniture will be separate. This all helps a lot later on. In work, it speeds things up significantly. I also highly recommend maintaining this hierarchy of your folders. That is, you don't necessarily have to follow me exactly, but come up with your own hierarchy and keep it consistent from project to project. Because when you transfer materials or files between projects, they will immediately have the same names. These folders will end up in the same folders. This is convenient and greatly speeds up the work. Also, for quick navigation among all this, that is, when our project grows, we will have a lot of different folders here. You can assign them colors. For example, materials. I always make the folder green. Why? Because to create anything in the content browser, we right-click and see that we can create here a lot of different things. Here we can create a material, and all materials have this kind of green underline. So we create a material, it looks like this. It's an empty material, but it has a green underline. That's why I always make the folder with materials green as well. We right-click, and there is set color. We click, and I make this folder somewhat greenish. Geometry. For example, I am importing now into this scene. I will highlight the geometry folder. We have several buttons for import. There is an import button. Right here, there is this plus sign with the label add, and right-click somewhere here in an empty space of the content browser. Right-click, we have import. There is simply a button, import, and add is analogous to right-clicking in an empty space. The same menu, we select import. Desktop menu one's opening. We don't pay attention to this. Geometry and even some materials have arrived to us. As you can see, the geometry has a blue underline. That is the texture. This texture came along with this table. It has a red underline. Therefore, we make the folders with textures red. We choose new color, make them red. This is not mandatory, but it speeds things up a lot later because there can be a million of those folders in the end. And we make the geometry like this, as we have it some kind of turquoise color. Also set color, new color, and we'll make it some color like that. And among all this, it will be much easier later to find the files we need. There you go. Also, by right-clicking, we have a lot more here. Add feature or content pack is what I told you about when creating the project. When we talked about how in automation or architecture there is some specific geometry, by pressing this button, we can add to the project, for example, what is in a first-person game character. We press it, and everything that is added, all the geometry, this automation, the movement, the character, it all comes here, and a folder will appear. Let me demonstrate how it looks. Add feature or cut that pack. I take first-person press add. It appeared for us, see? We now have a folder called first person arms. That is with the addition of different objects. Our tree will expand. There will be many folders and these colors. They will add to our speed because we will know that all geometry is this turquoise color. Materials are green, textures are red. You are not obliged, of course, to follow me exactly, but just so you remember which color corresponds to what, and you will work faster. Also, a few more words about the right-click. Here is Add, Quixel Content. This button no longer works because Quixel Bridge used to be separate. Now it has moved to Fab. So we click on Fab and our store will open, from which we will later upload our additional purchased object. Quick folder creation, quick blueprint creation. This is what I was talking about regarding programming. Levels will come later. Materials, Niagara is for creating fire, smoke, water, and such particles that are simulated. And there's much more that we will be using. Overall, it's like a folder for your project where you put everything you use, will use, plan to use, and later you pull it all out one by one. So now, as you saw, I put the table into the geometry folder, but I haven't added it to the scene yet. To add it to the scene, we simply take it and drag it into the scene. And now we have the table in the scene, but there can be many of them. And just like in 3D Max, we copy instances, if you know what that is, objects that are interconnected. If we change one of them in any way, all the others will change as well. It's the same here. We have the main object with us. Here in the content browser, we roughly speaking pull it out as a copy as many times as we want. But in the project, we have only one of these. That's why I mentioned in the previous lesson. If you have, for example, a dining table in the project with 12 chairs around it, you only need to transfer one chair and duplicate it in this way 12 times. And as you can see, these tables have appeared in our project. We can select them all nicely, right-click, add to, create a new folder, name it, for example, like furniture. And here will be our furniture. Also, for convenient sorting, you can add numbers. For example, architecture will be 0, furniture will be 1 before the name, and it will always stay at the top of the list. Our geometry. As for the content browser. And to get ahead, there might be 4 pieces. That is, if you are working on 2, 3 monitors, you go to Windows. Here we have the content browser. As you can see, there can be 4. We can enable another one and move it to another monitor or even open it. Like this. I'll try now. Now there are 2 of them. It's the same thing. Simply, for example, if you want to sort or move some models, textures between folders, you can do that. Here, I created a material. I want to move it to the materials folder. I just drag and drop it. And here you have the option to either copy or move. I choose move here, and that's it. It's moved. And this way you can organize things. Or also, here in the content browser, we have settings. Let's go in. There are 3 important aspects for us here. The first is the size of these icons. For example, I will open geometry. We have certain material geometry here. And here are the sizes. They can be very tiny. Well, these are very small in my opinion, or they can be very large. So you can see which size is more convenient for you depending on your monitor. And you can set it. The second point, we have checkboxes for show engine content and show plugin content here. What is this? Show engine content, if we enable it, an additional folder engine appears. As you can see, there are a bunch of folders with all sorts of strange names. It shows the hidden files of your Unreal. Sometimes this is necessary when we buy plugins on the marketplace. Sometimes they require this checkbox to be enabled for activation. We will need to find it later in engine content. There is a plugins folder here. And from here, you activate the plugin. This rarely happens, but when you buy a plugin, it's mentioned in the description. And just so you know, the same applies. Show plugin content. If you have any plugins installed, you will find them. Also, here. By default, they are disabled. I also disable them to keep more order in the content browser. And the last thing here in the settings is lock current browser. A convenient feature. Because, for example, by selecting a table in your scene right here on the right, in the settings, there is, for example, a material that is currently on this table. We want to find this material in the content browser because all those materials are also stored here. To find it, we click, here's a folder with a magnifying glass. And here in this content browser, as you can see, it immediately showed which folder it is in, opened it, and highlighted this specific material. If you are organizing, very often, while you are organizing, I still need to take from here. Material or material from here. And when you click this key, it gets reset and you have to go back again. I needed to go here and transfer it here. We have the option lock. Content browser, which means a little lock appears, indicating that it will not switch from this folder. So if we now find the material for this table, this one will remain unchanged. In the open unlocked content browser, it will be found. So you can always keep one. For example, only with textures. Well, we don't have any right now. Textures or with materials, one content browser where all your materials will be, and the rest can work. Adding geometry from the second content browser, and this one will always be dedicated to materials. It's convenient, and it comes with time in your work. You will understand what is more convenient for you. So, and another thing. is filters. Let me close one since we had one. I'll highlight the content folder, which contains everything else. And here too there are the same filters as in Outliner. Here we have filters. By clicking, a similar thing appears. We can add filters to different objects. For example, you need to find the textures that are in your project. We create a filter called Textures. We check the box. Alright, we have a whole section with textures. Let's remove it because there are too many of those filters. Let's just find the texture, just the texture. Added, the texture filter appeared. And by selecting the content folder, this filter applies to all folders that are inside. So, for example, if we now select only the geometry folder, it will show only the one texture that is there. For example, some textures might be in the first person folder. Let me select it. There are no textures here. There are already some textures here. So, you create a filter and then, for example, search for a specific texture and choose the folder where you want to find it. Filters can also be, for geometry you have a lot here. In the geometry folder you see you have both material and texture. And there can be a lot, but you only need the geometry. So you create a filter as well. Geometry in Unreal is called static mesh. That's why we also have this naming convention. And I'll talk about it now, how materials and all geometry are properly named in Unreal. So static mesh is the geometry. If we select this filter, only the geometry is shown to us. That is, if we select the content, we will see all the geometry that is in our project. These are some cubes and the gun that came with the character, with which he shoots and runs holding it. So it displayed this geometry. Remove this filter and we only have our folders. A very convenient feature. And filters can, depending on the size of your monitor, they might get in your way here. They can be moved both vertically, as they will fold like this now, and horizontally they can. This is what is in the settings here. Here is the filter display. Now they are vertical, but you can arrange them horizontally. Then they will be here, all in a row. There won't be many of them, we'll only have the main ones there. Static meshes, textures, and materials. To quickly find the things we need. So, this is everything related to our content browser. Once again, in a few words, it's like a folder with your project if you are working in 3D Max or any other program. You always have a folder with the file itself and all the textures related to it, and possibly some models you downloaded for that project. So here, it's the same, only it's located inside the Unreal project. And later, to use it, we need to drag it into our viewport. Here. Next we have this toolbar at the top. Long one. Few of us here. Floppy disk icon save. It asks what to save. Similarly, here in the content browser, we have our main Save All button. It saves everything directly. Because this floppy disk icon, if we click on it, it only saves the level we are working on. We will talk about levels later when I show how we organize our project. And this floppy disk only saves a part, meaning we always need to click Save All to save and exit the project, for example, using this button. Next we have work modes. The standard work mode in Unreal is selection, meaning we can select, add, copy our objects, move them, and navigate through the world. The next one is landscape. By selecting it, the landscape creation and painting mode will be activated. That is, I can, as you see, create and paint mountains. This is the landscape mode. We will have a separate lesson about it. Next is polyedge. This is the vegetation planting mode. That is, we can plant not only vegetation. For example, I will take our table, as it is our only geometry, and we can select and paint with it. I take it and simply paint with those tables. That is, it could be grass or trees, but for now I am painting with tables. This is the vegetation planting mode. And the modeling mode. Here we will make adjustments. If we need to correct a pivot or add another slot for material, it will happen here. And basically that's all, nothing more. We won't be using anything else here. The main one is selection, which we work in. Next we have the addition of standard objects. By standard objects, I mean some lights or lighting. or even cubes. I extracted everything from here. So we have here basic. These are things we don't need. Next, the most necessary ones. For us, this is light. There is directional light, sunlight, point light, bulb, spotlight, spotlight. Receive light is like a softbox. And skylight is like skylight in 3D Max. Next, there are standard primitive objects. Cube, sphere, cylinder. Cinematic cameras from here. Cinematic camera actor. We will extract the camera and control it. And basically, what we still need here will be visual effects. The main thing will be the post-process volume, but that will come later. As for geometry, we will not be using all of that anymore. Perhaps some clouds, they are here in the volumes, they will be extracted from here. But the simplest way to know what we need is to just click with the mouse. Here, click the plus sign and type, for example, I need a spotlight. To avoid searching for it too long, I just typed SPO. It showed spot and I dragged it out. Similarly, if I need, for example, a post-process volume, I type post. There is a post-process volume. What it is, I will explain later, but it's a fundamental thing that we will first pull into the project. We also need clouds, so we type cloud, and there is a volumetric cloud. So a quick search, you just need to know what to pull out. And we will go through all of this together later. The next tab is related to programming, more on that later. The following one is about animations and video clips, also to be discussed later. And this green play button activates the game mode, meaning when you press play, the game starts. Currently, we don't have any characters set up for us to play with. We are just flying with the new camera, just like we do in edit mode. But as you can see, all the aids in the viewport have disappeared. Objects, and our game has already started. Now I will quickly demonstrate what a game with a character might look like. We need this world settings. And here I am on this. Don't pay attention to this. It's not important for now, but here I press play. And I'm already running with the character. As you can see, I have hands, I jump, and I run, climb onto tables, meaning I am already interacting with them because I enabled this, a first-person down character. This is exactly in the interactive mode. When we start talking about programming, we will use this. Play. These three dots, they correspond to different modes. Right now, by pressing play, we are playing in the viewport. We can also open a separate window. More on this later. And the platforms will be discussed similarly later when we need to package our project. Client, we will use this menu. And we move to the far right. Here we have the settings. Here it is important for us a few things. First, there are the world settings. They are hidden by default. I just opened them. They are closed like this. You can find them or click here and select world settings. They initially appear as a detached window like this, and you can dock it somewhere. I always keep it for myself. Here on the side, hidden from details because we rarely need it, but we will need to refer to it a few times. So it opens either here, settings and world settings, or in Windows world settings. Here we can open the windows that we have closed. For example, we will close the content browser. We go into Windows and open the content browser for ourselves. This is how windows are opened in the Windows tab. Here we have, next is the project settings. We will talk about this and plugins. That is, if you bought and installed a plugin on the marketplace. We go here, search for it here, just like we searched for DataSmith, for example, and enabled it. Now it is disabled. You enable all these plugins here. We will talk about this later as well. Next, there is also a setting here that helps when working on weak computers. For example, you start working and your project runs smoothly, but as your project grows, the landscaping increases. Instead of completely hiding the landscaping to prevent your computer from lagging, there is something called engine scalability settings. That is to say, you degrade the display of everything, but without removing it. For example, if I set it to medium, you see now the shadows are calculated worse. Everything has become simpler to calculate. FPS, the load on the computer has decreased. This is for weaker computers. If you have a good graphics card, you won't even look here, and it is usually set to epic, not cinematic. This is already improved. When we render our animations, they will be rendered in cinematic mode. But by default, it is set to epic. Here, in principle, we don't need anything more. And now we will dive into the settings. First, not project settings, but here in Edit, we also have Editor Preferences. These are the settings for Unreal itself, not specifically for the project, but for the entire Unreal. That is, here you can change the hotkeys. We have photos here. Editor. Now I will find it. Keyboard shortcut, here it is. You click, search for what you specifically need. For example, just like in 3D Max, we isolate our object. That is, Alt-Q allows us to isolate only one object, for example, to position it somehow. The same as in Unreal, only by default it doesn't have a hotkey. For example, we selected this table, we want to isolate it, or we want this gun. Place it on this table. We select them together with Shift and we need to isolate them. We right-click and here is visibility. And we can hide with the H key. That is, we press it and they are hidden, but hiding in Unreal. Hides it only in the editor. As soon as we start the game, everything appears, meaning it's not like hiding in 3D Max. If we hide it, it stays hidden until we bring it back. From hidden, see, I exited the game mode and it's hidden. But actually, well, during the game it appears. And similarly, this eye here in the outliner does the same thing. It hides the selected objects or right-click visibility and hide. And here we have show only selected. It's the same as in 3D Max LTQ when we only see those two objects. We click and now, since we didn't take the light with us, we have no lighting, but we can, for example, switch to unlit mode. And work only with those two objects in the mode. For example, on the left. F. We click and we can place this gun on the table. We return to lead mode, perspective, and to go back, we select visibility, show. All actors, Ctrl-H, returns, opens, makes everything visible. Ctrl-H, we press everything, everything appears. We can turn the light back on and we have accordingly. It would be great for us to assign it to keys, just like in 3D Max, Alt-Q. We need show only selected, so we go to Editor Preferences. And we can simply write here in the search, show only selected. And it immediately here, show only selected. There is no hotkey. We press Alt-Q. That's it. After this, we close it. And now by selecting our table, we press Alt-Q and we already have a programmed hotkey. That is, everything happens right here in the editor preferences. Basically, there's nothing to change here, unless you want to change the colors of some selected objects, but that's more for personal preference. Honestly, besides the hotkeys, I don't use anything else in these settings. We are more interested in. Here are the settings specifically for project settings. If we have editor preferences here, these are the Unreal settings, and no matter which project we open, well, if it's the same 5.5 Unreal. Because for 5.4, there will be its own settings, for 5.3, its own. But for example, if you have 5 projects made in 5.5, then if you change these editor preferences in one of the projects, these settings will be saved in all projects made in 5.5. And specifically, project settings vary from project to project. They will differ. We open it, and here we have a million settings. We are interested in not so many, but I will explain the main points. For example, first on the left, here's maps and modes. What is this? Upon loading, if you noticed, as soon as we opened Unreal, this kind of scene opened for us. With those mountains and emptiness, there's already some sun clouds here. You can leave it, but I would recommend not selecting anything in maps and modes. Here is the editor startup, meaning on which map. Your project will start by default. if you don't select anything, meaning just clear it, leave it empty, your project will open as quickly as possible. That means Unreal won't need to spend time calculating all of this. It will simply open a black screen, meaning all the menus will be there, but the viewport will be black because no map will be open. Where you place your objects, and it will load as quickly as possible. This is convenient when, for example, you already have several projects and you want to transfer furniture from old projects. You don't need to load the entire project for the scene to load. You need the content browser to access the geometry and transfer it to another project. Therefore, for the fastest possible loading of the project itself, you simply go in and clean up the startup map, and that's it. The next thing we're interested in. I'm speaking to those who have used Unreal before and might already have projects in older versions. I want to update them to 5.5 because in 5.5 there are certain perks, improvements from bits, Lumen. Lumen works better. When transferring older projects to 5.5, you need to find here on the left, Platforms, Windows, and check that you have set here where DirectX SM6, this checkbox must be checked. And here it must be set to DirectX 12 because it might be set to 11. Then everything will work great, the lighting will be calculated correctly, and your video card will assist with all of that. Because these are new versions of shaders that must be set, but in older projects they were not set and they do not install automatically. So if you are moving from 5.1, 5.2 to 5.5, you just need to check these settings and set SM6. And check to ensure that DirectX 12 is set here. There you go. And the same main settings that interest us are right here on the left. We have a lot of options, but we need the rendering tab. It is responsible for the quality of our rendering, our lighting. There are many settings here, but the main thing we need to find is ray tracing. We already know what this is. It is the correct calculation of light and reflections. And if, of course, your video card supports it, we need to enable it. To enable it, we look for support hardware tracing. That is, we must enable it first. It's not necessary to use it in the scene, but it needs to be enabled. After that, if it supports you, meaning if your video card supports it, it will ask to restart Unreal. And then in Lumen, we check the box. Use ray tracing when it is possible. That is, if your video card supports it, we check this box. And then both mirrors and lighting will be calculated more accurately and correctly. The rest of the settings are default. We don't need to move them. All these settings, except for this one, support hardware ray tracing, can be changed in this post process that I pulled out, this transparent square. It has a lot of settings here, and all of them can be changed without going into the project settings. So I've told you a lot. In principle, well, you'll watch the video several times. And in practice, you'll get a little more familiar with the interface itself. Thank you for your attention. And to everyone who watched until the end. Subscribe to the channel, I'll try to post regularly. New tutorial videos on Unreal Engine. And if you have any questions or suggestions, I'm waiting for you in the comments. See you in the next one.